Well, good morning. Happy Tuesday. This Tuesday, the 8th of July, 2025. Beautiful day outside. It's still summer, and we had a little bit of rain last week. There was some over the weekend, but I think we're going to be without rain for about another week or so, and maybe even 2 weeks. And I thought because we had that rain before the 4th of July that we might have an early monsoon. But it looks like monsoon's been delayed a couple weeks, and so we won't have any monsoon rain in the short term. But it's still, in the morning and in the evening, it's still pleasant. I think it was, 25% humidity, which is just not enough, really, for the monsoon rains. I know it's dew point, but anyway. I don't know if I told you this, but right before we went on our summer hiatus, I had injured my knee pretty severely. My MCL, the inner knee muscle that connects the knee together. I have no idea how I injured it. None whatsoever. I just woke up one morning and it was really, really, really sore. I don't know if I don't know what I did. And I thought it would just go away. So I just did things as normal, and I think I made it worse. So I've been kind of favoring not really being on that knee a lot. I think I finally healed it, and then I had some inflammation in my knee joint. So I've been eating non-inflammatory foods to try to bring that inflammation down. And last Monday, I went for a 4-mile walk in the morning and came back, and my knee was just killing me, absolutely killing me. So I gave it another week. Yesterday, I went for a 2-mile walk, which was really the first time in a very, very long time, almost 8 weeks, 6 weeks, that I went on a walk. And I felt pretty good. My knee seemed to just do just fine. And this morning was a 3-mile walk, and it was a little sore, but definitely doable. And a week from Friday, we will fly to New Orleans for the National Youth Gathering. And typically it's about, I want to say 20,000 steps to 30,000 steps a day. So 10 to 15 miles a day of walking. So I have to be better by then. So I'm really, really trying to be very, very careful about my knee and try to heal it as best as I can. Because it's just so weird. It's absolutely weird, but I guess this is the process of getting old. Your body starts to fall apart. Oh my goodness. Just crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. And what else? Birthdays. We do have one birthday today. Roger Smith. Happy birthday, Roger. May you have a blessed, wonderful day. Now that's interesting. Not really centered. Let me just see if I can fix that a little bit. Nope, the other direction. The other direction. Yeah, maybe that's a little bit better. Yeah, let's try that. All right. We are in the book of Leviticus. We are at the base of Mount Sinai. Moses has led the people out of slavery in Egypt. Now they're going to wander in the wilderness for about 40 years. And while they are wandering, God is going to give Moses specific instructions about how they're to live. And that would be Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And so we are in Leviticus. Yesterday we talked about the basic animal offerings. There were 3 types of animal offerings: the herd, the flock, and then the pigeons, I guess, yeah. And I always get the herd and the flock. The herd, I believe, is like the large beasts of burden, like oxen and those sort of thing. The flock would be the sheep and the goats, and then the pigeons would be the birds, right? And all 3 of those were blood sacrifices, so they were for the atonement of sin. Today we're going to talk about a different kind of offering and kind of what it means and spend some time on it. So this is Leviticus chapter 2. And this is the grain offering. And I don't actually know if it's going to go to Leviticus 2. So I'm going to press this button. Yep. Well, let me press that button. And let me go over here. And sorry, right here. Okay. All right. When anyone brings a grain offering to the Lord, their offering is to be of the finest flour. They are to pour olive oil on it, put incense on it, and take it to Aaron's son, the priests. The priest shall take a handful of the flour and the oil together with the incense and burn this as a memorial portion of the altar, a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. The rest of the grain offering belongs to Aaron and his sons. It is the most holy part of the food offering presented to the Lord. So this isn't an animal offering. This is grain offering. Um, Grain, as you know, there are all sorts of grains. They grow in the ground. There's corn, there's wheat, there's oats, there's barley. I mean, there's basically anything that produces a grain that comes up out of the ground is food, right? Is some sort of food. Even our mesquite trees, they don't produce normal types of grain out of the ground, but they do produce those seed pods. And you can take those seed pods and you can crush them, and there's nutrients in the seeds in the seed pods. And my father was big into this theory that you should eat local honey and local foods because that boosted your immune system. So if you got honey that was from within 20 miles of where you live, and you ate that honey, that it protects your body against allergies and things like that. I have no idea if that was true, but that was my dad's thing. I personally, because I was raised with it, I feel like that there's a lot of truth to that, but I've never done a lot of research to see if it's true. Anyway, but the same thing is true about the mesquite pods. I understand. Like if you eat locally grown mesquite pods, it helps you in your immune system because you're bringing into your body foods that are, locally grown. And again, I haven't researched this. I've just been told this. And, how do you research it? Because I know as soon as I start researching it, I'm going to find one family of the research side that says, yes, it is good for you, and the other family of the research side that's going to say, this is all a wives' tale. And, I know it certainly doesn't harm. And we have actually crushed those seed pods from the mesquite tree. And it's got like an almondy flavor to it. And you can't make a loaf of bread with just seed pods. It's too sticky. It's too condensed. But you throw some of that in with normal flour. And it has a nice, rich taste to it. I mean, it's kind of cool. So in the Old Testament, they would find whatever grains they could. And it says you can bring grains, but here it says of the finest flour. So at some level, that grain has to be crushed and turned into flour. And then it's that flour that you can use to bake and to cook with. The grains itself really are too tough to digest. I suppose you could, if you had really, really strong teeth, you could, crunch on those grains in your mouth. And, depending upon how tough that grain is, you could get some nutrients for it. But another way to eat those grains is to take those grains, put them in some sort of mill of some sort, crush them down, and then you get the flour and you can bake with the flour. And here in southern Arizona, the indigenous tribes that used to live down here would take a big stone and another stone, and they would grind it with two stones, and eventually they would build a hole in the one stone, and they called that a metate. And typically it was corn, I think, and they would grind the corn down and make corn flour, and they would cook with corn flour. But and I will even say that if you go to Cienega Dam, which is not too far from Colossal Cave Road. So if you take Pantano Creek and you go east about 2 miles, you're going to reach an old dam. It's an outcropping of the rock in Cienega Creek, and so the water comes up out of the ground and it flows above the ground because the underneath it is where the stream would normally flow. There's rock there, so it flows up out of the ground. And so there's a stream that flows all year round, and there's a dam back there. But right near that dam is a whole bunch of holes. And those holes are where they would take, instruments and create, corn flour. It's little metates. So there's a huge amount of history down by that dam, because that dam, that outcropping, the dam is of course from the 1800s, but that spot as a location to get water has been around for as long, as people have lived in this area. So that is a very, very huge, long-standing source of water. It's interesting that that particular location, just because of the legalities of it, when they built Rancho del Lago, they built all these lakes, and they had to feed the lakes with water to keep them full. And so they built a big, huge 4-foot conduit, corrugated steel pipe or I'm sure before at one point it was probably wood sluices. But where the dam is, then the purpose of that dam is basically to just create an elevation of water so that that water can flow naturally into the lakes. So the owner of the golf course actually owns Cienega Dam, which to me is just, I mean, that's a natural resource that's been around for thousands of years, and it's owned by the golf course. It's just phenomenal to me. But I mean, on a good note is that all the water that goes into the lakes at the golf course is basically just, it's natural water that's going to evaporate anyway. So might as well put it in a lake and let it evaporate there. I mean, it's probably a good use of water. Anyway, so you bring the grain offering. You're going to bring the finest flour. You're going to grind it up and pour olive oil on it and maybe a little incense. And you offer this to the priest. And the priest is going to take some portion of that and he's going to burn it as an aroma to the Lord. Now, I don't know, the aroma to me that really is pleasing is what we would call flour with yeast and bread. That is a very, very, very pleasing aroma. The non-yeasted bread, it smells nice, but it's not near as nice as that fresh loaf of bread that you get out of the oven. But God would not allow you to put yeast in the bread, as we'll get into. So he would burn some portion of it. It would go up to the Lord as an offering. But the rest of it would be consumed by the priest as part of his living, basically. So when you bring that offering to God, the priest gives some portion of it to God to burn, but then he keeps the rest of it to eat, to sustain himself. And then, verse 4, if you bring a grain offering baked in an oven, it is to consist of the finest flour, either thick loaves made without yeast and with olive oil mixed in, or thin loaves made without yeast and brushed with olive oil. If your grain offering is prepared on a griddle, it is to be made of the finest flour mixed with oil and without yeast. Crumble it and pour oil on it. It is a grain offering. If your grain offering is cooked in a pan, it is to be made of the finest flour and some olive oil. Bring the grain offering made of these things to the Lord. Present it to the priest, who shall take it to the altar. He shall take out the memorial portion from the grain offering and burn it on the altar as a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. The rest of the grain offering belongs to Aaron and his sons. It is a most holy part of the food offering presented to the Lord. So, again, basically you bring this offering and some portion of it gets burned to God, and then Aaron and his sons, the priests, eat the rest of it and consume it. But it can't have yeast. And you wonder, why can't it have yeast? Well, it's a command by God, first of all, so you don't question God, you just do it. Obviously, we know that there was another time in history where they did not use yeast, and this is when they would bring the food, the offering that goes into the tent of meeting or the tabernacle. There was the bread table, and on that bread table was flour products, but it didn't have yeast in it. And the reason it didn't have yeast in it was because the Exodus, when they left, they had to leave in such a hurry that they couldn't have yeast in the bread. And so whenever there's no yeast in the bread, it's typically a reminder of the fact that God rescued them out of slavery in Egypt. And you could say that here, but there's also other theories about this, about how yeast works and how it changes the character of the bread. And I mean, there's all sorts of theories as to why there's no yeast. But God said, don't put yeast in it, so we don't put yeast in it. And God said it, I believe it, I'm going to do it. And so that's what we do. And again, it's divided to the priest and to God. Verse 14. Verse 11. Every grain offering you bring to the Lord must be made without yeast, for you're not to burn any yeast or honey in a food offering presented to the Lord. You may bring them to the Lord as an offering for the first fruits, but they are not to be offered on the altar as a pleasing aroma. Season all your grain offerings with salt. Do not leave the salt on the covenant of your God out of your grain offerings. Add salt to all your offerings. So everything had to have salt in it. You couldn't have honey. Honey was, in the ancient Near East, with all the different gods there, honey was actually an offering that was given to a lot of gods. So there couldn't be no confusion about that. God said, no honey. It's just going to be my offering that you give to me is basically a flour with no yeast, no honey, a little salt added. Obviously, a little bit of oil is okay, and incense is okay. All of these things are okay, but this is a distinctive offering between you and me. You're my people, I'm your God. This is what my offering is going to look like. No yeast, no honey. And season with salt. Now, salt, as you know, is a preservative. If you take any food and you put salt on it, particularly meat, I learned something recently that I don't know how in the world I lived as long as I did and did not know this, but I'll share it with you. When you take meat and you cut it a slab of meat, the bacteria that grows on the meat only grows on the outside of the meat. It does not grow internal to the meat. So if you salt the outside of the meat, the bacteria can't grow because the salt kind of protects the outside of the meat from the bacteria. And the inside of the meat can't get any bacteria in it because bacteria cannot penetrate into meat. Obviously, if you have an arrow that goes in, you might get, some infection where that arrow wound is. But if you dry meat and the outside of the meat is protected and the inside of the meat, meat can be dried and no infection, no bacteria can get in there. So meat was a preservative of incredible value, or salt was a preservative of incredible value. We did go to Romania, Jennifer and I. That would have been the Romania-Greece tour. That would have been 81, I think, 82, whenever that choir tour. Jennifer's dad used to lead choirs into Eastern Europe. One year we went to Romania and Greece. And that was 80. Pretty sure that was 80. Maybe it was 81. Maybe it was 82. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. And we stayed in this village called CBL in Romania. And the lady that ran her house, her name was Elizabeth. I remember all this stuff. And she had basically a tract home. The house was in the front, but in behind of the house was a plot of land where she had a cow, where she milked the cow to get food, chickens, and other things. And she basically made peach wine, peach brandy, chickens, grains, all those sort of things. But the meat that she had was heavily salted. I mean, heavily salted. And then she served it. The salt was so thick on that meat, you could not eat it. So it was highly preserved. I mean, it was legal to eat. It was completely safe because the amount of salt on it. But it was so salty you could barely eat it. Now, I'm sure she had no problem eating it because she'd been doing it all her life and she had a high tolerance for salt. But for those of us coming from the United States, eating her food, it was incredibly challenging. And if you go to places that don't have electricity and refrigeration and they preserve all their meat with salt, you just have to expect that you're going to have a tremendous amount of salt in that food. So I imagine that the salt was basically to preserve. I'm guessing that if you threw a little salt in with the flour, it prevented the flour from getting any bacteria or something, if any moisture got in there, or oil or whatever, that it preserved it. Because salt was a preservative. It could have been for taste too, but although I doubt it. It's probably for preservative. That would be my guess. So, yeah, do not leave the salt of the covenant of your God out of your grain offering. Let me just finish this. Verse 14. If you bring a grain offering of first fruits to the Lord, offer crushed heads of new grain roasted in the fire. Put oil and incense on it. It's a grain offering. The priest shall burn the memorial proportion of the crushed grain and the oil together with all the incense as a food offering presented to the Lord. So, this is all the grain offerings. Make sure there's salt. Make sure, you can bring oil. You can bring incense. A portion of it is going to be offered to the Lord, but then the rest of it goes to Aaron. Now, why would you do this? The animal offering was for a sacrifice, for atonement for sin. And because of the shedding of blood, whatever animal was there that shed blood, that was the atonement for sin. There's no shed blood here. It's basically just giving an offering. So it isn't for atonement for sin, but it is an offering, and it's an offering of thanks. If you have something in your life, like if you have an abundant, well, if you have any harvest whatsoever, that harvest is a gift from God out of the ground. So some portion of it should go back to God. And so this was the offering that you would give. And it typically happened at harvest time, or whenever you're creating grain throughout the year, milling grain throughout the year, you probably would harvest the grain, put it in some sort of silo or some sort of secure area. And then throughout the year, you would take that grain out and you would crush it and you would feed yourself with it. Well, as you're doing that, you're also thankful to God for the many blessings that he gives you in life. And so you give a portion of it to him, and then the priest gives a portion of it to God and keeps the other portion of it. I love this idea of the Israelites kind of having this opportunity, I guess you would say, or the mindset that everything we have is a gift from God. We don't do this very often. I mean, we always have special worship services, let's say, if there's a tragedy, 9/11 happens or something like that, and everybody gets together and they have, opportunity to reflect upon that. But how many times do we have a worship service where we all gather together just to simply thank God for his blessings? I think that'd be kind of a fun thing to do, to have every once in a while in your church, aside from Sunday morning, which is also an opportunity to thank God for the many blessings that he's given you, but like a special thank you, God, blessing for whatever. You pick something that God did. Maybe it is at harvest time. This last week, we had the blessing of the harvest. And we thanked God just basically for the grapes that were growing. So here in Vail, one of the vineyards, there's 12 vineyards in southern Arizona, and one of the vineyards is not far from where I live. It's it's less than 10 miles, maybe 7 miles from where I live. It's called Sharon Vineyard, and for many years now, they have invited me to come in and bless the harvest. And basically, there's this prayer that's very, very old that talks, I talk about the history of wine and winemaking and monks and the importance of wine for communion, the importance of communion for forgiveness of sins. And then we bless the harvest and we thank God for the harvest that's about to come. And that's just, I don't know why, but it's really, really cool, because it's not a gathering together, because of a time of sorrow. It's a gathering together of a time of joy and merriment. And wine is joy and merriment. I mean, there's just something about that particular harvest blessing that I just absolutely love. And this year, they came out with a new wine in honor of the Veil Preservation Society. This is their second Veil Preservation Society wine. And so when they sell a bottle of that wine, some percentage of those sales goes to the Veil Preservation Society. But it's just kind of a cool thing to gather together and to celebrate God's blessing. Well, that's the purpose of the grain offering. You come together and you just celebrate. You're just thankful, and it's an opportunity to be thankful. And this is something we as humans we're not very good at it, but we should be. Like every day, we should thank God for the blessing of a new day. And every night when we go to bed, thank God for the day that he gave us. And, focus our mindset more on the blessings that God provides than anything else. So anyway, that's the grain offering that God provides. So we'll leave it there, and we'll get into the next study tomorrow. Let's close in prayer. Gracious God, thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for the morning. Thank you for the day. Thank you for the evening. Help us to always thank you in everything. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. For those of you joining me online, thank you so much. For those of you joining me later, thank you so much. I pray you have a blessed day. And let me find my cursor. Where is my cursor? Oh, there it is. Go bring it down here. Oh, there we go. All right. So have a blessed day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye. Blessing, 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 blessing. Blessing, blessing. Yeah, it's there. It's not very loud. Not very loud.